So Councillor Waters, take a breath, get ready, and then we'll start.
I'm ready.
Okay, thank you. Welcome all to the Audit and Risk Committee, Tuesday the 26th of April. Apologies for absence, please. Thank you. Item number 1, minutes. To confirm the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 26th of January 2016. Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Waller. Seconder? Councillor Waller. All those in favour? I will sign. Just before we go any further, just for members and members of the public, I am not Councillor Macduff. I am just stepping in at the current time in my position as Vice Chair for the committee, so that is why I'm in the position. So if I could go on to item number 2, declarations of interest. Items number 3, petitions, deputation and questions. Item number 4, the Audit Committee Effectiveness and Annual Report, which is a verbal report going to be delivered by the Chair. I will defer that bit. I will defer that one as I'm not aware of the verbal report myself. So I'll move on to item number 5, the External Placements Audit Progress Report, which is page 5 in the documents. If I can have the introduction then to the introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Karen White, Head of Commissioning, is to my left. I'm here to obviously field any wider questions in relation to the report. I'll ask Karen to do a very brief introduction on the basis that I imagine members have already read the report, so we can label that and the opportunity for questions and comments.
Thank you. Obviously this was a limited assurance report that was completed in December. And so what we've tabled for today is an update and progress report. What I haven't done in the progress report is address each individual action. What I've done is kind of grouped the recommendations and talked through some of the context about how far we've progressed. This was a report, an audit, that the People Directorate had requested because we were aware that there were some risks in this area. And what we particularly wanted from the audit was to ensure that we had firstly identified all those risks and also to ensure that we had some support and some recommendations around what we might do to mitigate those. I'm glad to say that despite the limited assurance and the number of risks that were identified, they were all ones that we were aware of, so there wasn't anything that we haven't noted already. And I believe we've made some good progress so far in addressing those risks and mitigating them. I'm absolutely happy to take questions on any of the report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I first of all say that I would have found this report that we've got in front of us this evening far easier to read if it had been written in a way that the original recommendation was there and then the response next to it, underneath it, what have you. So I may well be saying things that are there that I've had trouble unpacking. Shall I carry on, Chairman? Are you happy? The original report, as I understand it, has as its second recommendation. It refers to social workers leading procurement and the need to have better skills to ensure value for money. But it also says that to improve probity, it should actually be a separation there, but your response is just to upskill the social workers. It's paragraph 3.43. I've written this out correctly. I did this a little while ago. Yes. And it refers also that in other authorities there are a specific team whose role it is to identify placements, but we don't have sufficient placements to warrant this. Now, there isn't any discussion anywhere about what other responses there might be. For example, buying into the skills of another authority so that we get the separation and so on. So my first question is just upskilling the current team the only option, and how do we get around the separation of duties in that?
Okay. I guess there's two parts to. One is upskilling the current team so they understand the process better, and also so that they have some clarity around how they can negotiate and what kind of benchmarking they should be looking for around the reviews. Part of that is intended to come through the Invest to Save work that we're doing, which will review all external placements and will give us some lessons learnt around the current process. In addition to that, and I accept your point about it doesn't give the separation and the probity, we've increased the capacity within the procurement and contract management team to enable a separation so that procurement, specialist procurement staff can support those social workers and those education workers in order to undertake that. We have also looked, and we're continuing to look at where we can go with regional frameworks, block contracts that other local authorities run, and use other local authority benchmark levels for fees in order to ensure that we have some parity. So we're trying to explore a range of options, but the immediate response to try and mitigate risk is to upskill those staff.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen. Two further points, Councillor Waller. First is really insightful point, and I would agree with what's behind your point, which is that let's have mind to different ways of delivering a better outcome, not just a single way of delivering it. Karen's made a good point there, I think, which is that the immediate risk should be effectively dealt with by this way of working. We should, however, keep in mind the outcome data associated with that activity. So what do we know about quality? What do we know about value for money? If we're not getting that throughput effectively, then we'll look at other options. I think the other point to make, certainly the work that we're doing here at the moment in relation to social workers leading procurement is based on local knowledge is better in the longer term. Certainly the information I've got looking at the regional debate around this is that wherever you can establish better local knowledge, the better the outcomes. But we'll pay very close attention to that as we move through. I think it's a point that you'll make.
I'd like to make an observation, if I may, before I move on to my next point, and that is the skills of being a good social worker are quite different from the skills for being good at negotiating and procuring. And whilst a good social worker ought to understand the provision that is available locally, and in the case of children perhaps not so locally, when we're talking about special schools for different more needs that are more difficult to meet locally. Nevertheless, I think that they are separate skills, and if we try and get them all in one person, I'm not sure we'll necessarily get efficiency and effectiveness. So that's my observation. Yep. Do you want to pause? And
if I just pause for a second.
So sorry. Thank you very much.
apologies to everyone for my late arrival. I had the time completely wrong. I was convinced it was 7:30, so I'm very sorry about that. Yeah, have you finished making your point?
I've finished my observation, but if I may, Chairman, can I move on to my second point?
Yes, can I just clarify, has the Director of you had a chance to introduce this update yet? Yes, okay, please carry on.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The question is the safeguarding training that we require before we place adults, do we offer it free to companies locally, and what is the uptake?
Sorry, I'm not quite clear. The safeguarding training.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not quite clear, Councillor Waller, what you're referring to. I don't want to answer the wrong thing. Sorry, I can see now. Recommendation 15. This is safeguarding training for residential care providers, and in fact for all our local providers, to ensure that placements we make and packages of care we give locally, the staff meet the required safeguarding levels. The training provision, which used to be in place, had ended, has been reinstated, and was reinstated, I believe, about December time, certainly since January. The training is back in place for our local providers. In addition to that, we do undertake checks with those out-of-county providers to ensure that they have the relevant safeguarding training in place for their staff before we place.
I'm afraid that doesn't answer my question. I understood what it was. What I don't know is all the providers that we place with, none of them are run by Rutland County Council. We don't manage them. They're all private providers. Are we providing this training free of charge to them, or are we charging them for taking the training?
Sorry, I completely missed your point. We provide for in-county providers, we provide the safeguarding training free of charge. So we have a Leicestershire, Rutland-wide social care training group which delivers accredited training to a range of providers around social care, which includes safeguarding. We buy into that training, and our providers can therefore access that free of charge.
Thank you. Why do we not charge when they're private providers?
I can offer a view on that, Councillor. I'm not sure that it will necessarily be a view that's formal policy. This is one of those areas where the risk to the individual is greater than the potential financial income in the short term, which is why I imagine we've taken the step rightly to reinstate the training free of charge. We'll review that though in terms of potential income into the authority.
I may be misremembering, but I thought in a budget discussion some while ago we took a view that we shouldn't be providing training to private providers. Clearly, we can require them to prove they have undertaken training before placing anybody. So I don't see the fact that we want to charge them would necessarily mean we're putting people into unsafe environments.
No, that's absolutely fair point, Councillor Waller. It's certainly a question I'll take back to my teams. If there's a more cost-effective way of delivering that training, we'll certainly come back and advise you on a change of policy in that regard. At the moment, I'm assured that the safeguarding of those individuals within provision that is the priority, but that absolutely we'll take that back and bring something back to you if we need to change it.
Thank you. Do any other members have any questions on the update? Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me if I jump about a bit with this. I think I'll try and start on a positive note with it before going into other points. I do welcome the fact that this was actually instigated by the directors itself to look into it, and that's a positive step. and also the thoroughness, and I think, of the internal audit in the report and picking up this issue, which is...
Could I just stop you there for a second then, Councillor, and apologies if some of this has already been covered. I did want to highlight the fact that after we had the original presentation on this particular internal audit report, I hadn't appreciated that the original report was carried out at the request of officers because they were aware of issues in this particular area. Karen's role was a newly created role, in part to address the issues that had been identified. The officers requested, even after Karen had arrived in the role, that the internal audit be carried out, and actually I took some comfort from the fact that Karen's initial findings of the issues in this area were actually confirmed by the internal audit report. There weren't any surprises. So I think perhaps that positioning, if you like, didn't come across when we had the original internal audit presentation of the limited assurance report. And I don't think it helped that it was on an evening when we had, as it happened, 3 limited assurance reports in a row. Now, we will come on later on to the overview of the internal audit activity of the whole of 2015-16, but one of the points I wanted to make was actually those 3 limited assurance reports were the only limited assurance reports for the whole year. It was just unfortunate that they all came at once. So the key message I wanted to really reinforce is bear in mind that these findings, although in some areas really not great, it was very much the officer's request to shine a light on an area they had concerns about, and so I think we need to try and focus on constructive debate in terms of how we take it forward. And Tim came at my request this evening to provide the update to really highlight the progress that Karen's been making since her arrival in this role. Sorry, Councillor Lamy, please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was, as I said, the points I do welcome, and just with regards to recommendation number 2, my heart did sink when I realised this was being led, the commissioning process, by the social workers. Obviously, they're employed for the work they do and the focus in supporting these individuals in need. And I think that, for me, would look between why we've had the issues with value for money and also the structure of it. So I would hope that this, as is a lesson learned within this area, is also going through the whole of the directorate and actually push through. Now, I know that we've had a changeover of the leadership in the directorate from what was previously there. But we did have the People First review, which was 18 months ago, and so it was a concern to learn and to see a limited assurance of this kind with so many issues brought out in the report. And the size of the budget, when you've got the 2 combined, is 3.4 million, which is, a slight work out, that's about the total 65% of the whole of the resources directly funded, which really, when you put it in, is a colossal amount. I mean, it's a limited assurance for that size of it. So it does need to be on concern to make sure it is taken on board.
Please, would you like to address that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to address those points, Councillor Lamy. I guess the first is the People First review, which I think was published nearly 2 years ago now, a very comprehensive review of everything to do people services. And I guess I would say, Councillor, that I was slightly surprised also when we started to shine a light on some of the processes and procedures we should have in place weren't in place. When I was scribbling down when we were talking there, Councillor, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. My approach right from the outset in this authority, in every authority I've ever worked for, is that let's get the improvement out as quickly as we can. In this particular area, as Karen's report has clearly indicated, we hadn't seen red flags in terms of risk to individuals, and we hadn't seen red flags in terms of risk to budget in a macro sense. So for those 2 reasons, it came as a surprise to me when we did shine a light that those issues came out quite as comprehensively as they did. The other side of that coin, though, is that it shows the quality of the audit process emerging. And I'm comfortable and confident that we are shining light on the right kinds of things. And I guess I'm frustrated that some of the practices that were in place well before my new leadership team were in place were quite so withered on the vine. But I've seen it many times before, and it's not about incompetence, it's not about a lack of leadership, it's really about making sure that we stay absolutely ahead of the curve in terms of the way we should process this kind of activity. It's a complex area, it requires a number of different professionals to work very closely together to make it work effectively. And I'm certainly confident that the action plan that attends this report, most if not all of the actions are already completed, will address those issues. And I'd strongly encourage this committee to continue to review the progress that we're making in this area, because that provides us with the assurance we need that members are fully sighted. And
in case not aware, we have a revisit of this internal audit scheduled for January 2017, purposely to really, hopefully, demonstrate all the hard work that's gone ahead and change the position. Councillor, please carry on.
Summarise on that point, I do realise I've said quite a few times in my time in the council in this chamber, my feeling how the people directorate was. It is under new leadership and it is going in a positive direction. I'm happy about that, but obviously I will look forward to the follow-up audit in January next year, and I will expect significant improvement and a good report from them. I do not expect a limited assurance next time.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you. I've listened to everything everyone has said, and I welcome the fact that we asked for the audit. I welcome the fact that it actually unearthed some issues, rather than told that it's not unearthed. But in terms of the response, at the risk of repeating things that have been said before, I feel even more stronger, perhaps, than my colleagues, that expecting social workers to do that commissioning is not the right approach. It might be a knee-jerk quick fix, but when we have a head of commissioning, and I think we've advertised for other posts, haven't we, within commissioning, I'm not sure that is the right response at all. It's not a good use of their time, it's not what they're trained for, and the public need them out there doing safeguarding, not arranging contracts.
Sorry, so just so I'm absolutely clear about what I'm saying in terms of who's doing what, it will be the social workers with support from the procurement and contracts management team. The social workers have the understanding of the needs of the individual and the needs within that placement, and whether that placement provider can meet those needs and can have the negotiation around the level of care input it is, whether it's X number of hours, whether it needs a one-on-one, a two-on-one. The support from the procurement and contracts management team, which you're absolutely right, Councillor, we have actually recruited some additional posts to, will provide the support around the negotiation of the fees themselves. So it's about those two officers from the two different teams working together to ensure that the package is suitable, meets the needs, and to negotiate the fee around that. Sorry, I perhaps wasn't clear.
No, maybe, I mean, I met with Karen after the previous audit meeting and Mark Andrews really to understand this area a bit better. And Karen did me a beautiful diagram, which I won't pass around, but it might be a useful illustration to actually draw up and circulate, because it demonstrated quite clearly that actually there should, in each case, for each contract, there should be two individuals working in parallel, the social worker or the SEN officer, alongside a member of Karen's team, who would be responsible for the tendering, supporting the contract monitoring, which obviously does need to rest in large with the social worker or SEN officer, but Karen's team would be covering the drawing up of the contracts, it would cover compliance visits and a contracts register, if I've got that correct. So I took a lot of comfort that actually it should be, or as I heard it, understood it, the two teams working in parallel for each activity. Have I got that?
Yes, that's correct.
Because I agree with you, Alan, we need the social workers to be doing their job.
If I may, Chair, we perhaps need that sending to us, because what it actually says is support for staff so that they feel more confident in undertaking these negotiations for themselves in future. That is the report as written.
Whereabouts are you, Councillor Waters?
3.43, second bullet point.
Sorry, perhaps what I haven't been clear about in the written report is who those staff are, so I apologise, that's my error.
Chair, if I may, I think certainly we could provide some additional information to support that. There's a point that's been made very eloquently here. The best practice across the region and coming through the regional groups that I attend, Directorate of Social Services, very clearly demonstrates that linkage between those two professions, which is critical at the front end. And the same risks emerge when we've got contractors working in isolation from understanding the need. So absolutely support what Karen said, but we want to be able to demonstrate that to you and show that that's what we're doing.
I think perhaps an organogram showing those touch points across the teams would help. Please.
I think perhaps the confusion arose in my case then, because presumably those commissioning people were not there before, and therefore saying those staff, it caused some confusion and assumed it meant staff that were actually in existence. No?
I've got one question, please, Chairman. It's under recommendation number 14, and it refers to testing, and it found that 3 cases where there'd been no annual review. And under management comments, it says the cases described as surprising. This will be reviewed, Head of Learning and Skills. I would like an explanation as to why the cases were surprising and not disappointing, which is what I would feel in this instance, and what the outcome of that review was, given that the due date was December last.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I agree with the Councillor that I would also use the word disappointing rather than surprising? I suspect that we were cogitating on this particular part of the report before we came in today. I'd like to provide a written answer to that if that's acceptable to you, on the grounds that I need to speak to Head of Learning and Skills in order to understand his thinking a bit better and provide a written response to you. So speak to that.
Yes.
You're still not happy with that, of course I'll come back and talk to you again.
That'd be great, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, so we're asked to note the update on progress made following the original external placements audit report, and to whether we endorse the request for a follow-up audit in January 2017. Can I take a show of hands? Councillor Moore?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a show of hands.
Either or proposing,
I don't mind. So, are we in support of both points? Yeah, that's full support there. Thank you very much. Just coming back to the agenda, did you cover item 4? Okay. So if I may, I'll take us all back to item 4. Splendid. So members should have in front of them a hard copy of the Audit Committee Effectiveness related electronically on the table separately. To your, and without naming names, approximately half of the committee have completed the questionnaire at this point in time. This was something that was brought to my attention by our Head of Internal Audit as being part of best practice that she in her wider role is seeing across other councils. The self-assessment questionnaire allows committee members really to review their performance for the year and highlight any areas where they might like to see training considered in future, any other issues that may be arising. And they will feed into the second item which you should have in front of you, which will be the annual report of the Audit and Risk Committee, which there's a draft here as an illustration. One of the things that needs to feed into it is the consolidated results of the self-assessment questionnaires. But this report report will go to full council really as a best practice route in demonstrating that as a committee we are being effective, maintaining our skills and training levels to be able to do the job that we're being asked to do. I'd be very happy if members would take the draft report away with them in particular and let me know if they have any particular comments or queries on that. When I've received the outstanding questionnaires, I'll circulate a full draft of the report to all members for prior approval ahead of it going to full council. Final point on that, at our January meeting, preceding our January meeting, we had a training session on fraud, which from talking to the members seemed to be very well received, and the general consensus from members seemed to be that a half-hour session in advance of one of these committee meetings was the easiest way to deliver such training. I would like to propose that of the 4 meetings we have a year, 2 of those meetings we attempt to include a similar piece of training, and the particular proposal that I have next in mind is at the June Audit and Risk Committee meeting we'll be asked to consider the draft AGS. So Rachel would be able to deliver a half-hour's training on the AGS in advance of that session, which I think will certainly be helpful for me as new chair and any other committee members that may not be fully comfortable with all aspects of the AGS. Could I have a show of hands in support of? Thank you very much. Okay, moving now on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Internal Audit Annual Report for the year 2015-16 that has just been completed. And I'll ask our Head of Internal Audit to introduce the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is obviously quite a comprehensive report, so I don't intend to talk through the whole report with you, but happy to take any questions. So this is the annual report, which reflects, it's a key requirement of the Internal Audit Service. So we do provide with an annual report which summarises all of the work we've completed during the year. And the key part of this is my annual Head of Internal Audit Assurance opinion. So the full report is provided to as Appendix A to the report. The report starts with my annual opinion, which is on page 23 of your pack, on page 5 of the report. So this has concluded a sufficient assurance opinion for the Council for the year 2015-16. So the rest of the report sets out the basis for my assurance opinion, all of the internal audit work that's been delivered during the year, and the outcomes of those. Just to draw your attention to a few key parts of the report. Within page 30 of the report, we've provided you with a summary of all of our key performance indicators. This is reporting on the performance of the Internal Audit Service itself. By the start of April, it has completed 100% of the 2015-16 audit plan. All of the reports are summarised for you in Appendix 1 of the report from page 31 onwards. So within here we've set out the areas, the areas reviewed and the basis for our assurance opinion for each of those assignments. Also included within there are follow-up reviews of the 2 limited assurance reports from the last financial year and some updates on those that we've revisited at the end of the financial year. Overall, the proportion of audits delivered for Rutland, the proportion that received a substantial assurance opinion was higher than 2014-15. This is set out for you in Table 1 on page 24 of the report, where we provide a summary of the overview of all of the outcomes of the audits delivered. The report also provides information on the implementation of actions arising from our audit reports. Again, this has been generally strong throughout the year. Of the recommendations arising from our reports throughout the year, 92% of these, which have been agreed and were due for implementation, have been completed appropriately throughout the year. So that's strong performance, and we are continuing to follow up all of the remaining recommendations. We have provided you with an overview of all of the overdue recommendations in Table 5 of the report on page 28. and an overview on implementation on page 27. As I said, there's a lot within the report, so I'm happy to take any questions from members. But overall, it does reflect on the performance of the internal audit team and the outcomes of all of the assignments we've delivered, and which form the basis for my overall assurance opinion for the year. Also provided in Appendix 2 is our annual assessment against the public sector internal audit standards, which has confirmed that we are operating in compliance. So again, I won't talk through all of that, it's quite a comprehensive review, but it's there for members if they have any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from members? Councillor Waller.
Thank you very much. On table 5, the summary of overdue recommendations, do you have any concerns about any of those?
No, I can report that all of them are actually, there is progress being made in relation to all of the outstanding recommendations. In relation to the two high ones, particularly if I just mention those to you, the first one is in relation to the Aggresso system. You're probably aware there is a full upgrade of the system underway, so that recommendation will be fully addressed as part of that upgrade, and I'm fully satisfied with the work that's underway on that. Internal audit will also be involved in the implementation of that new system as well, so we'll be keeping an eye on that progress. The other high recommendation was in relation to segregation of duties on payment runs for the back system. We did re-perform the benefits audit at the end of the last financial year, and we found out from that that arrangements had just been put into place, so they should now be operating effectively. So again, I feel that should be implemented by the next meeting. So I feel satisfied with those.
Thank you very much for that. And my other question relates to table 1 on page 23 or 34, I'm not sure on your version. It seems in the summary of our audit opinions that our financial systems are doing fairly well, but customer facing a lot less well. Is that a fair summary from me?
I would mention though that the financial systems are reviews that we do conduct on an annual basis, so we do review them, so we would hope that they would be a substantial assurance opinion, so that's reassuring. In relation to the customer facing audits, these are where we are risk based, so we are being asked to shed the light on those areas where there are some concerns, so they are going to be more focused on the high risk areas where there are potentially some weaknesses already identified, and we could be adding some value by identifying improvements. So I think that's probably the reason for that difference. Thank you.
Any other questions? The one other thing I wanted just to draw members' attention to was on page 29 and table 6. I just really wanted to highlight some of the additional areas that are covered by our internal audit team. Just as examples of other added value services that the team do provide, and in particular, as an example, the audit of 2 schools that was performed during the last financial year, 15-16, to provide assurance to our Section 151 officer and members on the adequacy and effectiveness on financial management in schools. And I just think it's very important that we have a team that are able and have the capacity to provide some of these additional services, where required. But overall, I'd just like to thank our Head of Internal Audit and her team for all their hard work over the last year. Thank you very much.
If I can just sort of finishing on that point, just good to see the continued improved performance of internal audit and the quality of the reports they give, especially in the areas we've needed. And it's good. I've sat in previous years and made criticisms of internal audit, but it seems to be doing very well now, so I'm pleased with it.
Great, thank you. We move now on to apologies, sorry, please.
Yeah, Chair, I just to echo some of the comments that have been made really. Obviously on this side of the table we take internal audit work very seriously, and I want to thank Rachel and the team for the work they've done this year. I think none of us around the table have been sitting here when we've had audit plans that haven't been delivered in following the year, and the audit work hasn't been the quality it is today. So I think that's the point Councillor Lamb mentioned. And I think the committee's seen some, very interesting work that stimulated a lot of lively debate. But fundamentally, will help us improve what we're here to do. And I think we all welcome that and we all appreciate it. And I think just a final point, just to note, that Rachel alluded to and didn't dwell on it, but clearly what the team do very proactively is assess where they are against the standards, and they're performing very well against the standards. So we're very pleased in terms of how things are going. So thank you again to Rachel and the team for the work they've done this year. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And we move now on to item 7, which is the internal audit plan for 2016-17. Over again to Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. At the last committee meeting, we discussed the process that will be followed in developing the internal audit plan for 2016-17. So we have now produced the plan for the new financial year on that basis, following the risk-based approach that we discussed. Provided this evening is a full report which sets out the process that we followed in developing that plan, and also talks about the resourcing of the internal audit team. But most importantly, in table 1 on page 71 is a copy of the draft internal audit plan for members' formal review and approval this evening. All of the assignments that we discussed and that members highlighted at the last committee meeting have been included within the draft internal audit plan, with the exception of blue badge fraud, which once risk assessed against some of the other areas was assessed as lower risk, but we can be reconsidered during the year. It is intended that the plan remains flexible throughout the year, so it will be subject to ongoing review to make sure we continue to focus on the key risk areas. And as such, I have made a further recommendation that a mechanism be agreed whereby there is a delegation for the Chair to agree to any amendments to the internal audit plan outside of committee meetings. We would subsequently report that to members at the next meeting, but it just gives us some flexibility to be responsive to any changes in the risk environment throughout the year. Also provided as part of the report is a copy of the internal audit charter. This is just for information, it's just for members to review and approve. It should be subject to a periodic review and formal approval by the committee. It sets out the internal audit service's purpose and authority to undertake the work that we do, so that we have access to the documentation we need, and sets out the role of internal audit. So I have reviewed that as part of my annual review of all of our key processes. I haven't proposed any material changes to the internal audit charter. The only amendment that I have made is to add a mission statement, which is in accordance with the revised public sector internal audit standards for 2016. So that's provided and is in track changes in the copy provided. So I'm happy to take any questions, but it's presented to you this evening for review and approval.
Given the first report we had regarding the commissioning, one area I'm leading on from that, which would be interested to maybe look at, is these SEM transport contracts and use of outside third-party firms regarding if it's taxis, I believe is what would be used. And that would be an area, given what we've done with the outside placements, would be I would be keen for an internal audit to look at.
Chairman, can I follow on from that? The two things that I picked up on this were, which I think is the same as Mr. Lally, is risk 4 and 11, that's taxi licensing, and risk 4 and 5 and safeguarding. And I think the two are linked. We know from Rutland that it was taxis that were being used, and taxi drivers in some cases were cures for young people who were groomed. And so I was wondering whether that was going to come into that particular piece of work on 4 and 11, and whether the risk 4 and 5, safeguarding, was that children or adults with those, was a question.
Richard, can I ask you to address Councillor Waller's point first, and then we'll pick up on Councillor Lemons' point?
So in relation to the safeguarding policies and procedures and compliance, and we would be looking at both adults and children there. That's why we've put 20 days aside for quite a big review of that area. In relation to the taxi licensing, absolutely, safeguarding for me is the biggest risk in that area, and that's why I've discussed it with the Chair, and I'm very keen for us to undertake that review earlier in the year. We will be looking, for example, at DBS checks and things being undertaken before any licenses are even considered. Thank you.
And do you feel there's enough capacity within the days allocated to that taxi licensing review to pick up a review of the SEN transport contracts, or do we need to look at whether overall we'll have some spare days and be able to pick that up?
I think we'll have to look at that in scope. I'm not sure that we would have scope within those 15 days if we are doing a full review on taxi licensing. It could be that we look to reallocate some of the other days, potentially from some of the larger audits, or look to use some of our savings from other assignments, but something that I can go back and look. What I will do is look back at when we last looked at SEN transport contracts, just to see whether we have looked at it recently and have any other sources of assurance. And on that basis, I'll consider whether or not we need to include an additional assignment in the plan.
Well, if Councillor Nanny would be happy, we could still approve the plan as we have it this evening. I'll ask Rachel to let me know when she's reviewed the time allocated, whether we think we can either re-order the priorities of the audits that we've already got in the plan this year to bring in an SEN transport contract review, or find some days available, and then we'll update at the next meeting if that would.
Perfectly happy with that if long as it's approved now and then bring it back to the next meeting for one.
Well, I think Mr. Lammy is right though, because we are in the process of reviewing transport across the board, and that will inevitably impact on SEN transport. So I think he is right.
Thank you. Sorry, that was going to be my point actually, that we have got the review underway. So I wonder if there are some things that could be addressed, or at least questions asked as part of that review, and then determine whether there is anything else required for internal audit.
So in that case, would you pick this up outside of internal audit, or
I think as a start that might be a good idea, yes.
Would committee members be happy with that as a first approach?
Yeah, but what I would like internal audit, given the good work they did, given the good work they did with that and how thorough it was, I think having internal audit look into it, cast their eye, would give me the greater assurance.
Yeah,
I support Councillor.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, then let's take it away and we'll review it in terms of whether we think there's available capacity in the plan to allocate some days specifically towards that, or if not, whether we think there's a lower priority item in the plan that could be deferred until next year, and that brought in your preference, and then we'll report back at the next meeting if that's acceptable. Great. Councillor Waters.
Thank you. I welcome Rachel's comments about safeguarding and taxi drivers. But given the fact that we are such a small authority, historically it has been taxi drivers from outside of Rutland have targeted our vulnerable children. Is there any way of talking to neighbouring authorities? What would your thoughts be?
Is this where they're transporting our service users?
No, just generally.
Okay. It's something I could potentially speak to other authorities and see whether they've done any work, but it would be difficult for us to speak any specific assurances.
Through the Chair, I think it needs more of a wider approach to it than specifically targeting our... I think we need to do it, but to be effective, it needs to be broader if the way can be found. I'll get an agreement with neighbouring authorities to do the same.
It's how to go about it.
Well, some of our neighbours clearly, Rachel and the team audit through the
yes,
arrangement
yeah,
we
so
have. So
you
could look to see whether anything's been covered or whether that review might be pending. But I think it's one we have to take back to the director as well, because clearly it's about audit, it's about what we do generally to not to target that area, but to be vigilant in that area. So I think we could take that back.
It feels like it's a sensible area to try and go beyond our immediate county remit.
Sorry, can I just go back to the SEN issue as well, please? Would we be, as Councillor Lammy, either today or outside of the meeting, is there a specific areas or questions that we would like answering during the review? Because obviously that would help. I think would help give us an indication of you know, how big the review might be or not. So I don't know whether the specific questions you had in mind that we could give sort of, we could point Rachel in the direction of, so to speak.
Have you got any specific areas? Would you like to give that some thought? And
If I could give it some extra thought,
Yeah.
I mean, it is about the actual contract, how it is managed with them, and obviously how that's tied into the safe government. But I'll...
It's just so we can make sure that
after the meeting.
Yeah.
you know, we target the right areas,
Yeah.
so to speak.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions on the plan from members? No. Okay, then apologies, I'm going to take you back to item 6 first, because I didn't actually ask you to approve the 2015-16 report. Which was, so members are required to review and approve the annual internal audit report and assurance opinion for 2015-16. Can I have a show of hands as to whether all members approve? Thank you very much. And then coming back to item 7. Firstly, members are required to review and approve the internal audit plan for 2016-17, subject to the fact that we may reprioritise one of the items or reallocate some of the days once we've got more clarity on the SEN transport requirement. So we may have a show of hands if members are happy to approve the internal audit plan as it stands. Thank you. And then would members give a show of hands if they're prepared to give authority to the Assistant Director of Finance to make changes to the audit plan for 2016-17 in consultation with the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee. So that would be in a situation such as this, where actually in consultation with Rachel we've realised that there is a lower priority item that can be deferred until 2016-17 meeting. Can I have a show of hands?
Sorry, when Rachel was talking about that, she said, and report back to this committee, and that's not in the recommendation, so I think
it should be added in minutes, yeah.
I know,
because I would expect us to be updating at the following meeting.
But that's still right.
Yes, no, totally agree. Okay, that will be added in. May I have a show of hands then? Thank you. And members are required to review and approve the internal audit charter. And I have a show of hands if all members are approving the charter. Thank you. Okay, we then move on to item number 8, which is the exempt item. Okay.
Chair, sorry, I think it might be advisable to try and remain in open session until we get to the point if and when someone has a question that relates to exempt information. But that's if we can try and talk around it as much as possible.
Should I read out the wording here?
Not unless you need to.
Fine. And so the report that we're reviewing is relates to. So it does actually relate to. Okay. In case anyone else was unclear, item 8 relates to the agenda item 9, fraud risk register, which will remain in open session to discuss the fraud risk register. We're asked to note the register and nothing more than that, but if members have any questions on the exempt items or specific items covered by the yellow pages of the fraud risk register, if they could please make me aware before they ask that question, because we'll need to ask members of the public if they can leave the open session.
Chairman, I'm sorry to be awkward, but I don't have any yellow pages, but are they Appendix A?
Yes.
That's fine.
Do you have an Appendix A?
Appendix A.
And it's the whole of Appendix A.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Okay, do any members have questions on any of item 9?
Item it is on. It is regarding the one of the risk registers as outlined in appendix. It shouldn't take long, but it is in the exempt papers.
Before we come to that, do any members have any other questions before we go into the exempt pages? No. Thank you. We'll now read that bit. Right. welcome. Thank you. So the committee is recommended to determine whether the public and press be excluded from the meeting in accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended and in accordance with the access to information provisions of Procedure Law 239 as the following item of business contains exempt information as defined in paragraph 7, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act. Paragraph 7, information relating to any action taken or to be taken in connection with the prevention, investigation or prosecution of crime. Do we need to approve that we're doing could I have a proposal that we go into closed session, please? Thank you, Councillor Waters, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Lemon. Okay, may I ask members of the public? Oh, sorry. Could all members please vote? Thank you. And may I ask members of the public? And the final point that I just did want to make on item 9 is that our fraud risk register was first prepared in 2015, and I understand from Rachel that we are still one of only a few councils to actually have a fraud risk register. So we are very much following best practice with this particular item. So even though it is very much a working document that we're still refining, I do think we are at the forefront of this particular activity. Moving on to item 10, the risk management update. Debbie, would you like to... Sorry. Sorry. Debbie, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you. This is, as is sort of routine now, as part of our quarterly meeting, an update on the strategic risk register. And I think addressed all of the points from the minutes of the last meeting in terms of the questions and the queries that were raised. I'm sure you will tell me if that's not the case. And also, this presents the proposed draft updated risk management strategy and policy. Now, I haven't gone into too much detail, Chair, in the report in terms of the changes from the previous document, mainly because the principles of the risk management strategy are the same. It's the same risk management matrix as we've just talked about, but a lot of the information in the previous strategy was context, what we referred to the Audit Commission, comprehensive performance assessment, those things, so it's quite out of date. So I just really wanted to reassure the committee that in terms of the way that we measure and assess risk, that is not proposed to be changed, but there's less contextual information, current information in the strategy to prevent it from quickly becoming out of date, and it's more about the framework. So I didn't really want to say much as Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Ward.
Thank you. On page 4, it's 3.1, first bullet point. We asked, there was further information was requested on how we might mitigate consequences of the risk of not knowing about people, and it says a verbal update will be provided at the meeting. I'm assuming that's now.
Yes, I'm afraid there's been, I think, probably a bit of misunderstanding on the ability to deliver that verbal update tonight. I'd expected the representative from the People Directorate to stay later into the meeting. It was a misunderstanding, so unfortunately I'm not in a position to be able to make that update. I think on the back of that, what I can say, Chair, is that I'll ask for a written update from the Director on that to be circulated to the committee. My apologies, the report was issued. I only realised later today that that wasn't going to the House.
Thank you. Thank you. May I carry on? On page 16, they're under 7, roles and responsibilities. The last one is all members and officers understand and act on key risks that could significantly impact da. Now, I can understand how members of this panel might, because we're trained and so on and so forth. But could I have some explanation of what this means for other members?
Yes, Chair, certainly. This is not necessarily about all members having an in-depth understanding of the risk register in the way that you do with the Audit Risk Committee. But this is about a general understanding of the risks that the Council are facing when taking decisions for various panels and committees and council are asked to take. So you recall that every report that we present to you has a section on risk, financial risk, legal risk, etc. Any other risks as part of those decisions. So it's really more of a general pointed to a need to understand the risks that are faced in particular circumstances and decisions.
Thank you. May I carry on? Yeah. Going into the actual register itself, I'm glad and welcome that cases not being known have appeared. It's item 4 for safeguarding children and 5 for the same for adults. So that's good that that risk has been included. But under current controls, and it might link back to my previous question about the update, or actions to take, there's nothing in there about these people that we might not know where there is a risk. So for example, I would have thought that in both adult and children, assuring appropriate links with the police might be an action. And I raised some while ago in this chamber the issue of the police following a process of recording where they felt children were vulnerable when they had been dealing with an adult situation, was not getting back to our Safeguarding Children board in terms of the data that they held, because the way the police officers and the PCSOs were recording didn't tie in with the systems that our social services had used, for example. So I'm still not convinced we don't have a risk there around safeguarding. And I would like to see something in the actions on those. That's a comment. I'm still commenting also on number 4.
Can I just pause you there, Councillor? Would any of the others like to address that first?
I can make a general comment in that this is a strategic risk register. It's intended to be relatively high level, and so we're trying to strike the right balance between keeping it like that and providing enough information on the action. So for risk 4, for example, the failure to safeguard children, in terms of the action set out there, they are fairly broad and high level. So it's a service improvement plan, for example. Now, I don't know every single action that sits in that improvement plan, and it wouldn't be right to list them all out in here. This is kind of a pointer to where those actions lie. It would be very difficult to set out every action that we take to manage the risk around failure to safeguard children. So it's about getting that balance right.
I accept that, Chairman. I'm sorry, Member of the Public. I accept that, Chairman, but actually with the case not being known has been added in, but no action has been added in to mitigate that circumstance. That's really my point. Okay, and I just want it logged and taken back. Under consequences in the same one again, I would have thought failure to safeguard, one of the primary consequences was the potential death or serious injury of a child, and that doesn't appear there. All of the consequences appear to be consequences for our reputation as a council, when actually what we're talking about here is the life of a young person.
Can I just respond to that point, Chair? I think it's a fair point, but in terms of the description of the risk is failure to safeguard and a child is significantly abused, badly hurt or dies. So it is in that is the risk itself, so we're just not repeating it in the consequences.
Fair enough, okay. Can I also make an observation about actions to achieve target on that? And it applies both to safeguarding children and safeguarding adults. And one of the things that we could do is improve the ability for members of the public to contact this authority if they feel there is a concern. And what you ought to do as an individual is contact the duties team in social services. But you can't do that directly. You have to go through the switchboard. And I've said it before, or at least I've written it before, to all councillors, and I'm going to say it now. I was in a situation where I needed to contact the duty team about 3 weeks ago. It took me 50 minutes to get through to the switchboard, only for it to then be seconds to get through to the duty team. And we ought to have a direct line number that is available to the public from the social services duty team.
If I may, Chair, thank you, Councillor Hall. You have that raised that issue with me, and I am looking at that particular example as to why we had to wait, regardless of who you want to speak to, why you had to wait that long. The approach that is in place at the moment is the protocol that we've agreed with the People Directorate in terms of how calls to duty desk are handled. They don't necessarily have always have the volumes of staff to deal with the call volumes. It's one of the reasons for the current approach. But it is something that I've asked to be looked at in terms of whether that is the best approach moving forward or whether it's working based on the examples that I think actually Councillor Walters has raised as well, that might not be the case, so that is under review.
Thank you.
We've got a timescale.
The issue actually raised with me yesterday, so it's something that I'm just going to dialogue with the team manager about at the moment, but I'd like to do it that quickly. Thank you.
That's it.
Any other questions from members?
With respect, Chair, I think I received this on Thursday night. I know that was the best we could do, but I shall have to reserve some comments as well later on there, and I've fully done this.
Right, I'm very happy for later comments to come in via email. Could I just then raise a query on the definitions? I think it's page 15. No, wait a second. There we go, page 21. I found these definitions very helpful in terms of trying to get a feel for, different people have different views to what you mean by low or likely or extremely likely. However, there are two areas that I have a slight concern about. On the financial measures, under impact measures, for minor, we've got financial revenue loss of up to 500,000 over the medium-term financial plan. Now, I appreciate that could be 500,000 over a 5-year period, but it could also potentially be 500,000 in 1 year of that, and that to me doesn't feel like a minor financial impact.
Yeah, we actually had quite a long debate about this, didn't we, when we were trying to set out some guidelines, but we've not articulated it in this way before. And it was set, in the context of the size of our budget, the size of our reserves, and it was a level that we felt as comfortable as possible with. I don't know, do you want to add anything else?
I don't know how to articulate any numbers really, to be honest, because to say to members of the public that, £400,000 is minor is not really what we're trying to say, and we're not trying to say that at all. We don't manage, we try and manage financial risk to a lot lower level than that. But when you start to put lower numbers on it, £10,000 for example, you would end up with 400 risks on the risk register. So what we did was we took advice from Zurich about where we should be going to be broadly consistent with the sorts of things that other authorities do. And hence, as Debbie said, we've come with a figure that was a percentage of budget like that. But let's be very clear, no one here is flippant about losses that are much less than that, and we don't necessarily consider them minor. But for the purposes of this exercise, it helps just put things in that context. That was the point. In relation to the risk that you look on the risk register, where they fit within a financial parameter. But we're not sitting here thinking a £400,000 loss would be, oh well, it's a minor loss.
No, actually, we did end up with levels that were lower than the original advice that came through from Zurich, even in terms of relative to our scale. We did move those thresholds down to the level that you see here. So that point is should not be cannot be overemphasised. Sorry, that we don't mean that don't look at this and think that 500k is insignificant.
So if I play that back to you in a slightly different way, these definitions, if you like, allow us to focus on the significant risks at an appropriate level rather than ending up with a risk register with 1,000 items on it.
Right.
Okay, fine. That answers the second query.
It is to assess and manage the risks that could prevent the council from meeting statutory obligations, the strategic objectives. So it is right at the highest level in that context.
Thank you. So for item 10, we were asked to consider the revised risk management strategy and policy Appendix A and recommend that it be presented to Cabinet for approval. Could I propose a further action? Thank you, Councillor Lanning. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Waller. All those in favour? Councillor Waters?
Abstention.
Okay, thank you. One abstention. And then we're asked to note the contents of the risk register and the actions underway to address the risks. So, all members confirm, noted. Councillor Waters abstaining. Thank you. Okay, moving on now to item 11, the external audit plan. We really need to put you at the top of the agenda for the next section, don't we? I'm so sorry. Thank you very much for your patience. Mr. Crawley, please introduce item 11.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask you to turn to page 104 in the pack, just on the headlines. And I'll just summarise the main issues around the plan, but I'll take you through it. Page 105 to introduce the plan, and you'll see from the detail set out that we have a new act to comply with the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014, and the National Audit has processed a new code of audit practice through Parliament. That's obviously following the demise of the Audit Commission, and the Audit Commission Act came to an end at the end of the 14-15 year. So we've got a new act, a new code approved by Parliament, and also a new regulator in the National Audit Office. But essentially our duties and responsibilities are largely unchanged. You see on the left hand side of page 105 the two main tenets of our work around financial statements work, which is governed by the International Standards on Auditing, and use resources work, which is the public sector add-on for our duties around concluding around the arrangements for economy, efficiency and effectiveness, and the value for money inclusion as we refer to it. So on the right hand side there, we just briefly mentioned it, there's sort of 4 stages of the financial statements audit and then value for money inclusion work. Just to focus first on the financial statements risks and the financial statements approach on page 106. We set out there the potential areas we could look at in terms of councils such as yourselves, and picked out the ones we think are particularly relevant for you. The 2 that we've picked out on the left hand side on the bullet points, management overriding controls and fraudulent revenue recognition, are two risks that we apply to every audit that we do, and that's because on the case of the management overriding controls, no matter how good your internal control system, management has the ability to override that through things like journals. So every audit that we do, we build in testing to look for management overriding controls. That's standard to everyone. Fraudulent revenue recognition is one we can take into account in terms of the fact that you're a local authority. In the private sector, obviously, it's very important, can be very important for tax reasons when revenue is recognised, but because you're not subject to those tax regimes, and so it doesn't really matter to you whether income is recognised in March or April in terms of year end, but if you've got business results that your job is depending on, then it links back to that management overriding controls as well. That fraudulent revenue recognition is much more of an issue in the private sector. So we do take into account, we're also able to take into account the nature of you as an organisation. We've also picked out some of the areas which sort of bubble underneath being what we would call a significant financial risk. Accounting for the Best Care Fund is one that is new this year. It's a bit more complicated than pool budgets have been in the past. Narrative statement is something that's new in terms of the annual report that you'll need to comply with, and also some changes around the way that property, plant and equipment is valued. But again, in that case, we can take into account the fact you're a public sector organisation, and the code of practice that you need to comply with takes that into account as well. So that sort of sets out the areas we've considered, and relatively low in terms of the number of risks we've picked out for you in terms of your context. So what we're doing on page 107 is put in the concept of materiality. Materiality is a level, we put a figure on it, and it's not just a figure, we also take into account qualitative aspects of what we find, but we set a materiality level, so officers know where we stand in terms of if we find an error, what our approach will be. And yes, at that stage, about 700,000, where we think that the perception of the reader would be changing if there's an error that we disagreed with management on, we will bring it back to you in September, and if you decide with management in terms of the treatment of that particular issue, then we would need to qualify the accounts and qualify our opinion if it was over that level. But I'd say it's not just the figure, we do take into account qualitative aspects as well. Just picking up the earlier point about attitudes to money and so on the right-hand side we've referred to something being clearly privileged less than 35,000. Just again to put the context on that, that's the definition in the auditing standards. And it's not saying that £35,000 is trivial, far from it. But what it's saying is errors beneath that are unlikely to add up to the level of 70,000 which we've set. So that 35,000 is driven by the fact where we set the materiality. What we report to you, that's also a reporting threshold, that we report to you any errors that we find above the 35,000. But again, if there are errors that we think are important in terms of qualitative aspects, we also bring those to you. So that gives you some context around the materiality when we come back to you in September with the report on the outcome of our audit. And what we said on page 108 onwards is the value for money conclusion. I mentioned that it has evolved. The Audit Commission set two criteria in its regime, around the arrangements for economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and your arrangements for financial resilience. And the National Audit Office has updated the guidance and updated the code in respect to the value for money conclusion. And on the right-hand side there, you'll see it's distilled those areas of value for money into one overall criterion and asked us to consider that, but then set three sub-criteria: informed decision-making, sustainable resource deployment, and working with partners and third parties. So those are the areas we'll be looking at in terms of the value for money conclusion. Again, the important thing I think is that what we should be able to do is make use of the work you're already doing for your own challenges, because obviously a lot of work goes into the budget and looking forward to the medium-term financial plan. You've got a lot of decisions to make, there's lots of uncertainty around government decisions and details to come through, and you need to be alert to all of those. So all of that work that you do, the finance team and beyond, feed into that, and you shouldn't be doing any work for our assessment. Obviously we ask for information, ask for detail and talk to officers, but you shouldn't be doing work just for our assessment, because we can make use of what you're doing already. So pages 109 and 110, we've set out the process we go through, but we haven't highlighted any particular high-level risk, and that's not to underestimate the challenges you face. And obviously we're very much aware that there are lots of things that have appeared in recent times which provide uncertainty. I think the first meetings have taken place with the people who are going to look at how business rates reform will actually come in by 2020, and the removal of OSG is linked to that. You've also got an announcement about small business rate relief and some uncertainty about how that will flow through in terms of impact on you and how you'll be compensated. The new house bonus has been reformed and so on. So schools being made into academies means that they would have charitable status and pay less business rates. There's all sorts of changes that are in progress at the moment. And obviously what we'll do is keep up to date with officers about how they're dealing with those challenges and dealing with the scenarios that might come through. What we'll do, again, we'll come back to you with the results of that in September alongside the audit work as usual. On page 111, we've set out the other matters, and again, there are aspects of our audit which are different to the private sector, the public accounts, and contribute towards that with a return, which we need to look at, and also elect a challenge, which is unique to local government. There has been some reform of that process under the Local Audit and Accountability Act. One of the key things is that the right of electors to object to your accounts is limited to the 30-day inspection period. Previously, they could object from a date right until the moment we signed the opinion, which obviously would be late September. But now it's a set 30-day period. You set the 30 days as long as they include the first 10 working days of July. So you must set the 30 days, and that is the period at which electors are allowed to object to your accounts. all through the rest of the year, they're allowed to contact us and make us aware of any issues they might be concerned about, and that hasn't changed. But that reform is an important one in terms of the process. We've also mentioned in the appendices, we've gone through the elements of audit approach, the audit team, and the independence and objectivity. And there are no declarations we need to make at this stage in terms of any safeguards or issues around independence and objectivity of the team or KPMG. But also just to mention on that page 111, we've mentioned there confirmation again of the audit fee reduction as a result of one of the last acts of the Audit Commission, which was our second procurement exercise. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Thank you very much for that overview. I think at this stage, obviously, we're waiting until you get into your work proper and see what you report there on. But thank you very much. I think we have so we were required to note the audit plan from the external auditors. Members confirmed. Moving on then to item 12, which is the REPA update. Mrs. Baker?
Excuse me. Problem. This is just we bring this quarterly update for each meeting. This is the annual update, which again outlines that we haven't done anything in terms of using the powers, which is a positive thing. Because they can be considered to be intrusive. And we've also attached the policy which Councillors rightly pointed out that needed to come here regularly for August 5. Section 2.6 is a requirement for members to review policy at least once a year. Nothing has changed in terms of legislation or practice, so it's the policy that was agreed by Cabinet. And no changes there to note. Happy to take any questions on that.
Members, do we have any questions?
Happy with the report and the answers.
Okay, then can I ask members to note the report and that we've reviewed the policy attached to Appendix A. Any questions? Thank you. And then I think we're on to any other order of business. In that case, 8:50. Thank you very much. Thank you.